Welcome to Faithing Out Loud. I'm Pastor Tony Ruth Smith, and this is my husband, Pastor Wesley Smith.
Hello.
And we are delighted that you're here to be with us as we think about what it means to live our lives out loud in the world in a way that honors Christ. Let's join the conversation. Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Faithing Out Loud. We are now deep in the season of Lent. And
yes,
as
favorite.
promised, we're going to be talking a little bit about spiritual disciplines, everybody's favorite topic. Who doesn't like the word discipline?
Yes, I love the season of Lent, we may get to this. It may be something I talk about as we look at these different spiritual disciplines. I think sometimes I love talking about these a lot more than practicing them.
I would think that most people would concur.
Easier said
than done. So what are spiritual disciplines, friends? Spiritual disciplines are just practices, habits, actions that we intentionally do with a goal of walking more faithfully in discipleship with Jesus. That's what it is.
I like that word practice. Really what spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices do is they train us and shape us to live a certain way in the world. And it's the way we think about practice. When I was growing up, my dad had me in like every sport.
That's ironic because you're not athletic at all.
Nor am I competitive. And so if you're neither competitive nor athletic.
It's a real potent mix.
It's a
your parents. It's
recipe.
Carefully calibrated for your dad's disappointment.
Yeah, it's a recipe for my dad's frustration. But I do know, like, when our son was playing baseball, we played like 7 or 8 seasons of baseball. I spent so much time as a kid and then later playing church league softball, kind of these things get kind of hardwired into you or written into your brain. So that just comes from kind of practice, and it can feel like drudgery or it can feel like that it's not productive. Mm-hmm. But you run, in whatever sport you play, you do these drills or you do these repetitive movements to train yourself that in the game you don't have to think about how to field a ground ball or how to swing a bat or how to shoot a free throw. You've done it so many times
that you know what to do.
You know what to do, and that the same principle for spiritual practices or spiritual disciplines. That you do the practices that we're going to talk about, so that when life seems to go off the rails, when things go awry, when you're dealing with something, or when you have to respond, you already know how to live in those moments.
Right.
You know how to pray in a deep way, or and we'll talk about fasting.
You know what it reminds me of? So, one of the things you and I do regularly when we lead worship is that we invite people. We'll say, okay, everybody, let's take a deep breath in and breathe it out. And we'll usually say we're going to do that 3 times for the Trinity, right?
Yeah, right.
So here's my favorite story. Kevin, our youth director, was telling us about being at a youth retreat, and all the kids were. There was just sort of a little bit of chaos because everybody was talking and they needed to kind of get everybody pulled back together and centered. And one of our youth stood up on the table and said, "All right, everybody, deep breath in."
Take a deep breath.
And I was like, "Yes."
They're paying attention.
They were paying. Like, she knew how to help everybody kind of get centered again. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that practice of deep breathing, the hope is that then when you have a moment in your life where you're like, I'm in chaos, I need to recenter myself, that I'll remember to take a breath.
Yeah, take a deep breath.
So Lauren Winter has this book that I love. Lauren Winter is a scholar. Anyway, she was at Duke for a time. She has this book called Mudhouse Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And part of her story is that she was raised Jewish and became Christian. And this book is talking about some of the Jewish practices of Sabbath that have been very important for her that she has kept in her Christian faith. But she says this about that. She says, practicing the spiritual disciplines does not make us Christians. Instead, practicing teaches us what it means to live as Christians. Mm-hmm. So, you don't do these things. It's not like I'm going to do this and then I'm going to be a Christian. It's I'm going to do this so that I can navigate this world in a way that is more reflective of my faith in Christ.
Yeah, it's like that. And I grew up in a church, United Methodist, but it was influenced, or where I grew up, you couldn't get away from a more kind of Southern Baptist or evangelical kind of way of thinking, and that we're always skeptical or suspicious of anything that smacked of works, like works righteousness, so to speak. That understandably, I mean, we are saved by grace, not by works, but there was a wariness about things like spiritual disciplines. And I know for people I grew up with and in church or whatever, some of those older folks, it felt too Catholic.
Right.
And but the way you're explaining it is exactly right. It's not that we're doing those things in order to be saved. We're not doing that so we can earn salvation. We're doing that as a response to what God has done and is doing, and as a way of living faithfully in the world.
Right. I also think that there are different spiritual disciplines we're going to talk about. We're getting ready to get into one, but not every spiritual discipline is one that every person needs to do.
Right.
Like I think that part of your process as a Christian person is sort of discerning what spiritual disciplines really help shape and form you in a meaningful way. Meaning, you can't just pick the easiest low-hanging fruit. That's okay. You should do that from time to time. But the cultivation of some of the spiritual disciplines that are maybe hardest for you are really important. So here's where I'm going to get us to where we're starting. There is the spiritual discipline of silence and solitude. That is a spiritual discipline. And that one is very hard for me. Now, some of you all are introverts, and some of you all are, you like to be alone, and you could not talk all day, and that will be completely okay with you. And that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. Silence and solitude as a spiritual discipline is not so much about just not talking. It's also about training your heart to listen to God. And the purpose of silence and solitude as a spiritual discipline is to teach you how to listen more deeply to God and to your own, to the callings, longings, needs of your own spirit.
Right. And just by contrast, I have no problem with solitude,
right?
Or with silence. Now, not for an extended period of time, but like it does not make me uncomfortable to spend a couple of days by myself.
Right.
But if you're thinking about it in terms of a spiritual discipline, you're exactly right. It's not that I'm in solitude and being silent so that I can, binge watch a show on Netflix.
Right. Or just be alone.
Or it's not just being alone
right.
and doing what I want to do. It is a purposeful solitude and silence. So there's a difference between, like, there are some Fridays my day off. Some Fridays where I just want to, camp out in our bonus room, lay on the couch, and again, binge watch a show or something.
Right. That
is not nourishing me spiritually.
That's right.
Now, it's restoring me physically and probably mentally, but it's not nourishing me spiritually. This kind of silence and solitude, more what you're talking about, would be me getting off the couch, going to the nearby park, and sitting or walking and just noticing creation and being in prayer as I'm walking. That's more along those lines. It doesn't have to be going for a walk. It doesn't have to be outside, but it's a prayerful, intentional silence and solitude, as opposed to I'm going to take a day off and do whatever.
Right. So this for me. This has been one of my really important spiritual disciplines in the last 17 years, probably, of my life. And for me, it's I go to a place called the Well of Mercy up in Harmony, North Carolina, and I don't know that you have to go there. You need to go. That's good for me. Being away is important for me. And what's funny about that is when I first started practicing solitude and silence as a spiritual discipline, I mean, it's incredibly difficult. Because for me, what would happen is I was begin to be afraid about what I was going to hear in the silence. Like what God was going to speak to me, and there was a degree to which I went into it afraid of what I would find out, not only about God but also about myself. And like at the beginning, when I first started doing this, I would take all these things to fill up the time, right? I got to have things to fill up the time. And the longer I have done it, the less I do that. I have stopped feeling so much that sense of, if I get quiet, God's going to chastise me for all the things that I've done wrong or all the ways that I'm not enough. And what I found instead is that God meets me in these silence, in the solitude, with grace that I need to continue the process of being transformed. So one of the things that's come up for me, and I've talked to you about this is not in any spiritual discipline book you're ever going to find. This is a Tony Ruth special, okay? When part of the companion for me of the spiritual discipline of silence and solitude is something I call the spiritual discipline of uselessness. Mm-hmm. And what that means for me is that when I go into silence and solitude, I produce nothing, I accomplish nothing, and I'm still worthy of God's love. And for me, for someone who has a responsibility complex to beat the band, for someone who puts a lot of my value in what I can produce, because I am very, culturally speaking, I am very Southern Appalachian American about that my value is in what I can do. Mm-hmm. And for me to consciously practice being loved, cherished, and having value when I do and accomplish nothing is incredibly transformational spiritually.
Right.
And the practice of silence and solitude is what has gotten me to that, some of that learning. It is not, for me, loneliness. It's not... the discipline of solitude is not about knowing an inner emptiness. It's about knowing an inner fulfillment. Like that God and I are in deep connected relationship with one another in a way that is fulfilling to me in some deep ways. Right. And yeah, sometimes when I go away, it's not that I'm always quiet. Sometimes I'll take walks and I'll talk out loud to God like I'm walking with a friend. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I don't say anything at all. But the point is that I'm trying to create some inner quiet so that I can hear God more truly speaking, singing His grace over me. Right. And sometimes that means that I have to confess things, and sometimes that means I just let God love me.
And I think one of the things that's going to come up that's going to be, as we talk about these spiritual disciplines during Lent, a theme is that Jesus sets the example for us.
That's right.
That we can look in the Gospels and see where Jesus had this rhythm of engagement and being engaged with people and meeting people's needs or teaching, whatever, but then he would withdraw.
That's right.
To a quiet place. He would withdraw by himself. Sometimes he would take Peter, James, and John, so like the inner circle, but a lot of times said Jesus, one story, he gets in a boat and crosses the other side. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't, that just is what happens. Sometimes the world pulls him back in, like he gets drawn back in by the crowds, which is instructive for me too. Like if I'm trying to take some silence and solitude and life intrudes upon that, that's not a failure.
Right.
That happens.
Right.
And it happened to Jesus. So using Jesus as our model with these spiritual disciplines or with silence and solitude, it teaches us the deep value of these things.
Right.
And not only do we need to quiet the noise externally and kind of unplug and get away, we've got to do the hard work of this discipline is quieting the internal noise. Mm-hmm. And that's why you don't fill it up with TV or movies or music or whatever, or even read an entertaining book. You fill that, you kind of quiet that by sitting with God.
Right. And so here's what I would say. It's going to be uncomfortable at first. Mm-hmm. So I think the place to start, if you've never done this before, is to, and especially, God love y'all who have small children, because this is really hard when you have children.
Oh, yeah.
I think you can take advantage of what you might call the little solitudes of the day, like setting your alarm 5 minutes before or 5 to 10 minutes before you know you're going to have to get up. and do that in the morning or over your morning coffee or on your drive to work. My children think I'm so weird. I regularly have nothing on when I drive to work, like no radio, no podcast, no nothing. It's just silence. You can't do that.
I can't do that.
Just to create taking advantage of the little solitudes that happen during your day and just saying, offering a little prayer, here I am, God, I'm listening.
Yep.
And just intentionally be.
Yep.
And begin to hear what God might have to say to you. And the truth is, some of the things that God's going to say to you in those moments are going to be really lovely and comforting, and some of them are going to make you sincerely uncomfortable.
Yes.
But not everything that makes you uncomfortable is something you need to push away. Sometimes that discomfort is inviting you into a deeper experience of God or a place that God wants to set you free.
All right. Let's keep talking about that. Thank you for listening to Faithing Out Loud. Be sure to like and subscribe if your platform allows that. We'll see you next time.